"How dare you bring this in here?" The voice roared through the polished walls of the bank lobby like a thunderclap, startling every customer within earshot. Heads turned. Silence followed. Then came the shocking sound of paper being torn in half, ripped violently, shredded in front of the man who had handed it over. A check, his check, destroyed before his eyes. A black veteran, a man who had worn the nation's uniform, stood frozen as his sacrifice was trampled in front of strangers. Before we go deep, what country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and if you believe dignity is priceless, if you know respect cannot be torn apart without consequence, then hit subscribe right now and stay with this story. Because what happened inside that bank proves that humiliation is a spark that can ignite chaos. His name was Charles Daniels, a man of quiet strength. His broad shoulders still carried the weight of combat tours. His dark skin bore the sun of foreign deserts, and his eyes, deep, steady, weary, held memories of nights under fire when survival depended on courage alone. For years, Charles served in uniform, saluted by comrades, honored with medals that gleamed under military lights. He returned home not as a celebrity, not as a man of fortune, but as a father, a neighbor, a citizen who believed that his service had earned him at least one thing: respect. On this morning, he stepped into the bank, not looking for favors, not asking for sympathy. He carried a government-issued check, a veteran's compensation, earned through blood and years of service. His stride was measured, his shoes worn but polished, his presence dignified. He was not there to beg. He was there to deposit what was rightfully his. But what awaited him was not dignity, it was humiliation. The teller eyed him from behind the glass counter. Her posture stiffened, her lips curled with disdain. The line was busy, customers shifting with impatience, the soft buzz of the bank's lights overhead blending with the rustle of paper. But when Charles reached forward with his check, all that sound seemed to stop. She snatched it from his hand, glancing at the name. A scoff escaped her lips, sharp enough for the next customer to hear. Then came words that sliced deeper than any blade. "This doesn't look real." Before Charles could explain, before he could even steady his breath, she lifted the check high into the air, eyes flashing with contempt, and tore it down the middle. The sound of paper ripping cracked like a whip across the lobby. Once, twice, again, until nothing remained but scraps fluttering from her hands. Gasps erupted. A mother shielded her child's eyes. A businessman shook his head in disbelief. Some customers pulled out their phones, recording instantly. Others whispered, the words unbelievable and racist passing between them. And Charles? Charles stood still. He did not lunge. He did not shout. His body stiffened like stone, his face a mask of pain and restraint. This was a man who had once faced enemy fire without flinching. Yet here, in the bank of his own hometown, it was the humiliation of a simple ripped check that threatened to break him. The teller smirked, her voice dripping with venom. The implication was clear. Not only did she not believe in the value of the check, she did not believe in the value of the man who carried it. The paper, shredded into pieces, floated to the floor, and with it so did the fragile illusion that respect was guaranteed to those who served. The room fell quiet, the kind of silence that hums louder than noise. All eyes locked on the veteran. Would he explode? Would he shout? Would he crumble? Charles bent down, his large hands gathering the scraps of the check like sacred fragments. Every motion was slow, deliberate, heavy. Each piece he picked up carried not just ink and numbers, but his dignity, ripped apart in front of strangers. He stood again, his shoulders square, his gaze forward. Not a word left his lips. He simply stood there holding the torn remains in his hand. The silence burned. Suspense tightened every chest in that lobby. Even the security guard by the door shifted uneasily, caught between duty and conscience. The teller expected him to lash out. She expected anger, a scene, a reason to call him violent. But Charles gave her nothing. His silence was louder than any scream. The crowd shifted. Customers glanced at one another, tension rippling through the room. Phones continued recording. Every second stretched longer than the last, like the pause before a storm. Then, as if fate had been waiting, the storm began. The first voice rose from the back of the line. "You can't do that! That's a veteran!" Another followed. "This is racism, plain and simple." The silence cracked open, and chaos poured in. Customers surged forward, demanding answers, shouting over the teller's counter. Mothers pointed fingers, men raised their voices. The bank lobby transformed from quiet order to furious uproar in seconds. The teller stammered, her confidence faltering. She tried to wave them off, insisting she was following procedure, but the crowd was relentless. Words like shameful, disgusting, and unacceptable rang out, bouncing off the marble walls. The manager burst from his office, tie askew, face flushed. He stormed toward the counter, barking for silence, but when he saw the torn check in Charles's hand, his expression collapsed. Rage flickered in his eyes, not at the veteran, but at the teller. "What have you done?" he hissed, loud enough for all to hear. His voice dripped with panic. Customers filmed, their cameras capturing every second. The teller stuttered, pointing at Charles, but her excuses drowned beneath the noise. Phones buzzed as footage spread across social media, already catching fire. The lobby pulsed with fury. Some customers threatened to close their accounts. Others demanded the police be called, not for Charles, but for the teller who had just destroyed a federal check. And through it all, Charles remained unmoving, a pillar of quiet strength amid the chaos. His silence commanded the room more powerfully than the shouts. His dignity, though shredded moments before, now drew the respect of every soul present. The teller paled, sweat trickling down her temple. Her smirk was gone, her arrogance shattered. The chaos was no longer against Charles. It was against her. The bank manager turned to Charles with trembling respect. His voice cracked as he apologized, promising the check would be reissued, the insult corrected, but the damage was done. Customers surrounded Charles, patting his back, shaking his hand, whispering thanks for his service. The very people who had once stood silent now stood as witnesses to his dignity. Then came the revelation, one that the teller could never have imagined. Charles Daniels wasn't just a veteran. He was a decorated war hero, awarded the Bronze Star for bravery under fire, honored by the governor himself in a public ceremony. His face had once graced the front page of the local newspaper, hailed as a protector of freedom. And now, that same man had been humiliated by a teller in front of cameras that were already streaming his story across the city. Within minutes, calls flooded the bank's headquarters. Executives scrambled, issuing statements, demanding accountability. Reporters appeared outside, lights flashing through the windows. The teller was escorted out, her face pale, her steps stumbling as the crowd jeered. The same arrogance that once lifted her chin now dragged her head down in shame. Charles did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply stood, check reissued in his hand, surrounded by respect he had always deserved. The reversal was complete. Charles Daniels left that bank not as a broken man, but as a symbol. He walked through the doors the same way he had walked through the gates of military bases years before, with dignity. The torn check was replaced, but the memory of what had happened would not be erased. Not by the bank, not by the teller, not by anyone who had stood in that lobby and watched respect shredded into pieces. Because this wasn't just about a check. This was about something far greater. It was about dignity. It was about race. It was about the truth that humiliation, when inflicted on the innocent, will always come back to burn the guilty. The chaos that Teller unleashed consumed her, not him. And as Charles disappeared into the sunlight, his medals still resting in a drawer at home, the world was reminded that respect, once torn, can bring down the walls of the mighty. So if you believe in justice, if you believe dignity is worth defending, then subscribe now. Because here, we tell the stories they try to silence. And here, we remind the world that every voice matters.